You've probably seen the headlines. Gen Z doesn't want to work. Gen Z is unhireable. Gen Z is impossible to work with. Gen Z wants $200,000 just to check emails. Or maybe you've just felt it. Like, no matter what you do, the degree, the projects, the resume, the tweaks, nothing seems to move the needle. No replies, no interviews, no internships, no real opportunities. Lately, I've been seeing an idea going around. People are calling it the Gen Z career apocalypse. And honestly, it doesn't feel that far off. It's not that Gen Z doesn't want to work, it's that the entry points into the workforce, and especially in the white-collar knowledge sector, are more broken than they've ever been. I want to talk about why that's happening. You know, why building a career in its early stages really feels like trying to break into a locked house with no doors. And I'm not really here to give a call to action or wrap it up with a bow or anything, just to talk about what's going on, because I think a lot of people are feeling this, but don't quite know how to put it into words. And I mean, it all kind of starts at the top, right? Hiring is way down. And if you've been watching my videos up to this point, you know that that's not a surprise. I've probably mentioned that in every video to this point. Companies are still scared. Inflation is still sticky. Interest rates are still high. Elections are coming up and going. International supply chains are still a mess. And business leaders hate uncertainty. And so they freeze hiring. They cut budgets and they wait for the uncertainty to pass. And the jobs that supposedly do exist, well, they're being posted, but they're not always filled. You've probably seen this headline too, the ghost jobs epidemic, roles that companies say that they're hiring for, but really have no intention of actually filling. Oftentimes they just want to see what kind of candidates are going to apply, and sometimes they forget to take the listing down. But the sad truth of this is that companies really are just data harvesting, which is just collecting all your information from your application and then selling it on to data brokers. And after all that, you're left with a small, measly percentage of job applications and postings that have several other thousand job applicants, but hey, at least they're real, right? Like I said, I've probably talked about this in every video to this point, and I don't need to continue to beat a dead horse. The job market sucks. Adding to this was a great point that the Defiant Gatekeeper here on YouTube actually just posted about earlier today as I'm recording this. And that is that innovation in the market as a whole is just way down and has been since the release of the smartphone. Without getting too into the weeds here, economic growth and by extension job hiring growth really depends on actual innovation. Building real products, taking real risks, real company and business building. And since the release of the iPhone, that's really slowed down. And as a result, companies are relying on the government and the Federal Reserve to determine whether or not they can make capital investment. And since that recent period of COVID inflation, that has completely stopped. You have venture capital funding drying up, you have startups dying out, you have big companies that are optimizing all their existing products and not developing new ones. And now the only thing keeping us afloat really are large businesses putting AI tags on things that have already existed in the machine learning space, or new pushing developments like LLMs and AI agents. But that stuff isn't creating real value yet. It's not actually innovating. And Defiant Gatekeeper says as much in a lot of his other videos. And this results in fewer companies opening fewer new teams in fewer new departments while posting fewer new job roles. The number of people entering the workforce has not slowed down, but the number of new roles on the job market has definitely slowed down. And that's especially apparent in the entry-level job market. The central theme of kind of this video and a lot of other videos on my channel is that even if you're doing everything right, if you're entry level, it still might not matter. Because internships have been decimated as a concept, and a lot of programs in schools were cut during COVID. And a lot of the remaining internships are kind of scammy, like there's still unpaid internships, and I've even seen job postings going around for you pay us internships, which should be criminal. And your first entry-level job out of college or out of whatever vocational school you're coming from is going to require 1 or 2 or more years of experience. And this one's been joked and memed into the ground. How are you supposed to get experience for your first job when your first job requires experience? And that's all before mentioning AI. Like I've said in my other videos, AI really isn't replacing true professionals just yet, but it is replacing a lot of the repetitive, easy tasks that juniors used to start out with. And that's in every industry, not just computer science or tech, but in any area of business. And from a company's perspective, if you have an AI that's doing all of this work faster and better, that also doesn't have to sleep or eat or take time off or get paid, it's a no-brainer. And we've seen the whole entry-level market just get decimated as a result. And then in comes the internet gaslighting that tells you, oh, you just need to work harder, or you need to be smarter, or you need to use AI. And I mean, I've probably been guilty of that myself. Or even worse, just telling you that you're screwed and that your career has no future and that you're just doomed. And it's usually that point where somebody says, well, maybe Gen Z just needs to go into the trades. And to be crystal clear, I know that there are a lot of people who are watching this type of video who are in the trades. Trade work can be a fantastic option. The market is craving more electricians and mechanics and welders and plumbers and contractors. That work is there, and it's going to continue to be there. And it's going to be a lot harder to replace with robotics than current white-collar work is to replace with AI agents. But the trades are also not some magical shortcut either. Blue-collar work is physically demanding, it's regional dependent, and it's still underpaid in most places, especially at an entry level and especially if you're not in a union. Just like every other sector of the labor market, wages haven't kept up with inflation, and apprenticeship programs can be hard to get into. And if you're in a small town or a rural area pretty far from a city, the opportunities just might not exist altogether. And you know, at the end of the day, any tradesman is going to tell you that trades work isn't for everybody. And even if we did push everybody into the trades, we would run into the same supply and demand issue that you're seeing with computer science. All of this comes back together to combine into a terrible feedback loop. You need experience to get hired, but you can't get that experience because nobody's hiring. And you need skills, but the kinds of entry-level tasks that used to help you build those skills have either been automated or stripped out of the workflow. And connections, truthfully, are also kind of cooked these days. Internships used to be the golden goose for connections, especially for those younger workers. But as I just went over, internships are kind of dead. And what you're kind of left with are in-person classes and professors or networking events or friends and familial connections or people that you just meet on the internet. Like I said in my last video, these are your best options now. But again, that's not a perfect solution for the whole problem because a lot of people are starting to figure out that that is the best way to do things now. Or rather, the only thing to do now. And this is usually the part of the video where I try to make it practical or helpful or give you a piece of advice, where I say, here's what you can do. But unfortunately, that's really not what this video is for. Like I've been saying, I've made a few other videos that focus on how you can carve out your small space within this economy. How you can get your foot in the door, how you learn the skills, how you use AI, and I'm going to keep making those because I do think there's a lot of value there and I think that somebody out there can benefit from them. But I seriously wanted to just take some time and space to call out that this is really hard. The whole system is just undeniably messed up. One way I've heard it put that I really like is that the early career pipeline is clogged. That usual advice that I give, just network more, just start a side project, just apply to more jobs, that kind of stuff is still valid and I do still stand by that, but it's not always going to work right away. And that kind of stuff is simple, but it's not easy. And that's not an indictment of you or anybody around you that you see struggling. Things are just hard right now. Unfortunately, we are in a weird transitional moment for the economy and the market and the world. And at the end of the day, that's just something that you got to ride the wave on. One quick little note that I will add at the end of the video here that I haven't actually seen all that much talked about recently is that it's getting easier to start your own business and build something that way than it is to get an internship. This kind of comes back to the start a side project and start building something in public without getting your first internship or your first real job experience. But I am dead serious. It is probably at this point easier to spin up an app and teach yourself how to do all these things and then start to try to monetize that than it is to try to get an internship at like a Fortune 500 company. So I guess I was wrong earlier. I do have a call to action in this video and it is to build something. AI agents, coding, or otherwise, you can absolutely build up any sort of app now by teaching yourself how to use AI tools, and you can get something spun up in a weekend. Or in the rest of business, whether that's, marketing or finance or things like that, or just anything in any area, man. If you have an idea, now is the best time to act on that and to build it. But yeah, I kind of agree with all the Gen Z career apocalypse headlines. Careers are dependent on their foundation. And if we can't build careers now, it's just going to make everything harder and worse going into the future. It's obviously not that Gen Z doesn't want to work. It's because the jobs are fewer, the pathways are worse, the tools that we used to rely on, internships, entry-level work, connections, all of that's worse than what it used to be. And I really wish that I had some magical fix for everybody, but I don't. I'm just some guy on the internet. I will say though, I really do feel for you, especially if you're in the trenches trying to build out the start to your career. I definitely lucked out in terms of the time that I graduated and the opportunities that I've been faced with, but it's tough. That's That's all I got to say on it. Hopefully future videos will take more of a data and analytical approach. I really like talking about markets and the economy, and if you take a step back from the human element, I think we're at a really interesting time in the history of the market. And the central theme there is that this period that we're in is not going to last forever. No matter how bleak and grim things seem, I'm going to say the same thing that I said at the end of my last video, which is things won't stay bleak forever. So thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it if you stuck around and listened to me up to this point.